So the next section is called The End of the Kali Yuga Draws Near. Moving up to the present, we are fast approaching the end of the Kali Yuga, with its archetypal themes woven deeply into the pattern of major existential crises now confronting civilization. It's as if the unresolved karma of the past 5,000 years is accumulating, concentrating, and manifesting within a short, intense period of time, a grand finale to the Dark Age. The intense experiences at the ending of this cycle presents to humanity forces it to finally confront and overcome its past failures and shortcomings. In so doing, mankind is enabled to liberate itself from the baggage of the past so that it can now focus its attention on a new collective goal, building toward the establishment of a new golden age. The institutions that have played major roles in driving the events of the Kali Yuga, particularly those concerning oligarchy, capitalism, and empire, are again involved in the current spate of crises now facing mankind. In the globalized civilization of the future, however, there is no more room for these institutions to persist. Each has played a unique and important role in driving forward the Dharma of the age, but now that it's time for the Kali Yuga to come to its final end, we must transcend the constraints they impose and shed them like an old skin, embracing in their place a new organizing logic for civilization. The world nation that is to come will arise from the deconstruction of the base elements of the modern world order that the empires of the Kali Yuga have catalyzed. Our task is to reconstruct these elements into the foundation of a new globalized form of civilization, the world nation. The world nation that is to come will arise from the deconstruction of the base elements of the modern world order and their reconstruction into the form of a new globalized pattern of civilization. The American Empire is the epicenter of this alchemical project, with the themes of the Kali Yuga playing out in a particularly potent manner through the story of America's rise and fall as global hegemon. As with Rome before it, the pending downfall of America indicates the last gasp of a dying civilization, one that Kali will no longer allow to be carried forward into the world of the future. But unlike with Rome, the death of America will not result in the deconstruction and balkanization of civilization. Rather, America's destiny is to give birth to the world nation, which will arise out of the flame and ash of its decaying empire and emerge as a forward advancement of America's highest ideals. Elaborating on the themes involved with this alchemical death and rebirth process, Manly P. Hall writes that, quote, "Humanity is now approaching the end of an age of iron," which was Plato's term for the Kali Yuga. Revulsion mechanisms are setting in, and humanity is becoming wary with the sterility of its conditions. In time, this revolt against the limitations of materialism will result in the reestablishment of the Golden Age, that blessed time when the gods walk with men. As we approach the end of the Kali Yuga, civilization will find itself moving out of its previous condition of material sterility and back toward one of spiritual fertility. Hall informs us that this transformation will be supported by an increase of natural vitality, which moves into human life, enlivens it, and begins guiding it toward a new birth in wisdom and truth. This new birth is mankind's reward for successfully overcoming the trials, obstacles, and challenges it faced during the Kali Yuga, which took the form of war, crime, and poverty, all of which must be experienced to the fullest before the mind will reject them in favor of a simpler and more mature course of action. So next section is called The Dweller on the Threshold. The numerous existential crises now facing mankind together constitute the bodily form of an archetypal adversary, what in the ancient mysteries was called the Dweller on the Threshold. This adversary represents the guardian at the gate, who bars the pathway to transcendence and demands that the candidate successfully confront and overcome its challenge in order to progress to the next stage of their initiation journey. Every initiate of the mysteries was required to face off against this existential adversary. Today, we are being presented with a great collective form of it, with this dweller manifesting as the accumulated sum of the various disasters now facing our civilization. The dweller on the threshold arises out of the repressed shadow tendencies and unresolved negative karma of the initiate themselves. It is a manifestation of their psychological shadow, in other words. The intense pressure of the initiation process provides the alchemical heat necessary to force one's inner impurities outward, projecting them in the form of a shadow adversary. This adversary confronts the initiate as the personification of their worst fears, tendencies, and shortcomings. Faced with this existential threat, the candidate can either shrink from the confrontation and fail their initiation test, or rise to the challenge and use the conflict as a means to liberate themselves from the negative attributes that their shadow adversary is personifying and projecting back at them. In other words, when we confront the dweller as an external foe, we are in actuality confronting an external projection of the inner shadow complexes and evil tendencies we hold within ourselves. Consequently, the only way to defeat this adversary is to vanquish the negative elements within ourselves that it feeds off of. When you cleanse yourself of its fuel source, the dweller ceases its attacks upon you, and you are now prepared to walk through the doorway it guards toward the new birth in wisdom and truth that Manly Hall told us about, and that the mystery schools have been preparing you for and driving you towards. Simply put, the spiritual function of the dweller archetype and the reason the mystery schools harnessed it as an initiation tool is because it forces the candidate to transmute the negative karma they hold within themselves and convert it into positive soul power, which they can then carry forward and use in the next phase of their soul's evolutionary development journey. It's fitting that mankind's great collective confrontation with the dweller archetype should occur at the precise moment the Kali Yuga approaches its final endpoint. Kali has drawn us into her initiation portal with the promise of a great evolutionary leap forward in human civilization possible on the other side of the guardian at the gate now confronting us. In psychological terms, this dweller is the manifestation of what Carl Jung termed the collective shadow. It appears in different forms in different cultures and regions, but today is primarily manifesting through the activities of American Empire. To better understand the nature of the shadow adversary that we are now collectively facing, in this book we're going to delve deep into the history, mechanics, and endgame of American Empire, overviewing how it's structured, what its internal mechanics are, how it has evolved through time, what its current form looks like, and where within its body the shadow has taken hold. In other words, we're going to shine a light on regions of American society that have not yet seen the light of public awareness. And in so doing, we're going to set the stage for a social and psychological process of reintegration and self-transformation to occur. From an alchemical perspective, this book offers a deconstruction of the Pax Americana, stripping it down to its base elements and showing how each component can be cleansed, purified, and reassembled in the effort of forming a new paradigm of global government from their union. One that will be rooted in the Platonic ideal of the world nation. The hierarchs of this institution hold a direct connection in consciousness with the spirit world above. Like the Bodhisattvas of Buddhism, they have pledged themselves to the task of guiding mankind toward the eventual attainment of its evolutionary completion. Theosophists call the institution that houses these sages and wise men the Great White Lodge. The Rosicrucians of the Middle Ages called it the Invisible College. It is a mystery school, and one of its key symbols, the all-seeing eye, can be found on the US dollar bill. In every age of civilization, this esoteric spiritual institution has existed. It is perennial, with its eternal home residing in the etheric fields that pervade and permeate the planet. From this ethereal headquarters, its hierarchs administer a network of terrestrial institutions, which collectively serve as the outer gateways to its invisible inner structure. These terrestrial gateways into the mysteries take different forms in different ages. In the heyday of classical civilization, they resided within the inner sanctums of the pagan religious temples. Back then, its existence was more widely known and accepted, with its initiates occupying key positions of influence within the overt power structures of ancient society. Over the course of the Kali Yuga, however, this situation changed, and gradually the mystery schools and their terrestrial ambassadors disappeared from public view. The Great White Lodge never ceased existing. It merely shifted from an active to passive involvement in the affairs of society, working from deep behind the scenes rather than out on the surface. As we move toward the end of Kali's initiation portal, one of our key tasks is to rediscover the concealed existence of this institution and call upon it, drawing upon its resources and guidance to aid us in achieving our victory over the dweller, who bars our passage to a better world beyond. Because of its association with initiation, the phoenix should be understood as yet another archetypal symbol of the mystery schools. Its inclusion on the dollar bill alongside the all-seeing eye is therefore an indication that the mysteries are currently active within America. Located within a concealed vantage point at the heart of American Empire, this esoteric institution has been quietly working to guide mankind through Kali's initiation portal and toward its rebirth into a new paradigm of global government. The overt structures driving American Empire, the so-called deep state or shadow government, surround and conceal this mystery school. They exist as manifestations of the collective shadow and embody the archetype of the dweller on the threshold. In other words, they personify the guardian at the gate which barricades mankind's great leap forward into a new and better world beyond. In the coming years, the manifestation of the dweller within America will engulf its nation, its empire, and its vassal colonies in a great pyre of flame. This event may or may not coincide with the synchronistic emergence of environmental catastrophes. Either way, the archetypal themes of the Armageddon will emerge, after which point a great transformation in world civilization will occur. This will involve the collective rebirth of society into the form of a new world nation, which will alchemically rise out of the deconstructed elements of the world's last great empire, America. The arrival of this world nation will signify the formal ending of the Kali Yuga and herald the beginning of a new cycle of human development, one that will eventually result in the establishment of a new golden age on Earth. Bibhu Dev Misra, in his recent book Yuga Shift, makes a strong case that the exact duration of the Kali Yuga is 5,701 years, with its starting date coming in 3676 BC rather than 3102 BC, and its end date slated for 2025 AD, aka next year. Misra's timeline makes sense to me for 3 reasons.
We also realize that at almost any point in man's career, he might have come to a hopeless blocking of his progress, had not crisis arisen. Now we look back over the pages of history again, and we find almost constant record of crisis. We are in such a situation today. And perhaps we are a little more worried than we ever were before, because the gradual tendency in the last several centuries has been toward world involvement in crisis. Up to a comparatively recent time, critical situations were more or less isolated. One group, one structure might come into emergency. But the rest of the world went along. Now, however, the emergency is one emergency. One critical situation threatens us, and out of it must come the only solution, as we well realize, and have realized for years, namely world solution. But in all, utopians in general realize that what we call a perfect state today must be actually a world state. The only foundation big enough for the everlasting house is the whole planet. Its tessellated floor must be the earth, and the magnificent span of its ceilings must be the heavens, and its ornaments must be the stars. Nothing less than this one house, nothing less than this one world, built over the ashes of many worlds, can meet the challenge of our present consciousness.